Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending my talk, Designing Communities for Kindness. This is a talk I've been wanting to do for ages, and I'm really excited to finally be presenting it. I wish I was in person, but obviously I'm still happy that we are here online. So yeah, let's just get into it. I'm really excited. I'm really nervous. So let's go. Okay. Um, so the world can feel like a very lonely place. I've been lucky enough to always have people I could talk to every day, people who cared about me, and lived in places where I could meet more people. I definitely wasn't short on any opportunities to connect with people, but I definitely felt short on connection a number of times. It's hard to escape this feeling of feeling very separate or isolated or depressed, honestly, but all the times I've been able to get through them have been by finding communities and making the active but difficult effort to reach out. And sometimes it's been the active effort of others that have saved me. So I really wanted to talk about kindness online. Some communities are physical, obviously, and some are online. And if we consider how we use and structure these online spaces to be healthy and consider how we make deep connections, that could be a really powerful thing. Maybe kindness isn't talked about anymore because we've become so used to it and it's become so ubiquitous in online spaces we take it for granted. Or we've become jaded by the very platforms we found solace in. And I mean, for really good reason too. But it's really easy to be jaded and do nothing about it, and it's harder to be jaded and do something. So this talk focuses not on multiplayer in-game chats, but on the places that players gather outside of the games, on places like Discord, forums, or Twitter. And here's the thing, for a lot of us, online spaces have become our communities, the places where we socialize, learn the norms of the place, and find our belongingness. Essentially, this can be thought of as something similar to the role of like a church or something large families once played. So even if we don't want to, we need to start asking ourselves, what kind of communities are we building? And the reason I find this so important is because, hi, I'm Victoria. I'm the communications director at Kitbox Games, which is a small indie studio in Montreal, Canada. We develop and publish a bunch of games, maybe some of which you've heard of. Also, my Twitter, at the VTran. Feel free to follow and tweet at me as this presentation goes on. But basically, no matter what game we make or publish or develop, what's important to me is that no matter what game it is, that it's a welcoming and kind space for any player joining. There are layers to help people act, of course, but I'm speaking from a more macro sociological basis. So before we get into design, we need to talk basics, which is how you can set any sort of tone for your community at all. Devs tend to know they want a community, but neglect considering what kind of belongingness they want from them. And then those who consider it might decide they want fluffy concepts like positive or healthy or engaged or nice or any number of words that you've probably heard before. And that's a really great goal, but it doesn't concretely describe what actions to take. So how do you get there? That's where community developers come in. Community developers grow and build up and direct the fan base in the direction we want it to move towards. You may think that, say, a violent FPS game will only attract violent, aggressive people, but that's wrong, for sure. Some of the nicest people can be found here, and the ultimate final tone is dependent on the structure of the space that you set out. So if you want to start thinking like a community developer and how you can start to set tone, here are 5 mental qualities as a community dev to keep in mind. And don't worry, we get into the nitty-gritty of the actual structural part in just a bit. So first is ambition. Do you plan for and demand the best of your platform and community? You know, you need to have a goal. You need to have an actual community idea in mind. Second is decisiveness. It will involve some work from you, from moderators, and a willingness to ban, which is a really uncomfortable situation, and I won't lie about that. Third is clarity. So I'm going to mention this a lot during the talk, but we cannot devalue the importance of soft skills. Soft skills are important, and the ability to articulate yourself in this. And of course, collaboration. You're not a lone wolf. Are you working with your team and your community to actually build these spaces? And finally, energy. So do you bring the positivity to the community and lead by example? And once you've set your goals and purpose as a community dev, you'll be able to better set the tone for the community that you want. And for our purposes, we'll be talking about how to design communities for kindness. But of course, if we talk about kindness, we do need to define it. And one of the most important things that I consider when I talk about kindness is that it is a verb. It is not a noun. It requires practice. It requires continual effort and continual acts. So kind community design doesn't mean chanting positive affirmations into your community every day, though you can do it if you want to. I'm not going to stop you, and whatever floats your boat. But what it really means is creating a safe, low pressure, helpful, and encouraging interactive space among the players, who in turn want to help each other. Superficial notions of kindness won't suffice here. When we are kind, it doesn't mean we're giving people a pass for bad behavior. Responding with, we just need to be kind to one another when someone does something, like calling another person a slur, brushes over real complexities of life. So kindness means we need to hold people accountable, think of the realities of the world, and set up our spaces to be both warm and progressive. And with that, we get into a few caveats to kindness design. So just really quickly, one, these things will not automatically make your space kinder or safer. This takes time and continued effort. Two, this isn't some mass strategy dreamed up to get user attention and hit KPIs. Kindness is based on being genuine. And while this will help you in the long term, in the short term, it is a frightening and maybe uncomfortable situation to be in sometimes. And as with anything, there are a lot of variables that you'll have to think of depending on team size, game size, and community size. Our community strategies may only have been as successful as they are because we're relatively small. Giant mega communities with million unit selling games probably need additional strategies. Essentially, I want people to be mindful of how they love and interact with their games and not just what they love. So let's talk about design communities for what I consider to be kindness. So these are the basic steps towards kindness design, which I'll extrapolate on further. The first base step is to create rules, which are social systems that shape and influence behavior. Rules that aren't as helpful as you think they are things like don't be a dick or just be nice, be respectful, etc. These aren't really that productive or actually informative and often result in people disputing the rule's meaning when they break it. Also, honestly, don't be a dick is like the bare minimum people should be online. So to build better rules, we need to understand what a social system is. Social systems are the relationships between the individuals, groups, and institutions. So they can predict and shape how your behavior is influenced by the certain group that someone is a part of. For example, the way you behave and interact at work might be very different from how you interact at home. The same goes for whether you're in a hospital, a library, a school, a museum, etc. These systems have their own set of rules that allows the group and institution as a whole to function smoothly. Breaking the rules causes chaos or resistance, and game communities are exactly the same. In the book The Forest and the Trees by Alan G. Johnson, he uses the board game Monopoly as an example. So Monopoly is a mini social system with rules. Following these rules offer the path of least resistance to playing the game, but following them also impacts player behavior. If you've played Monopoly before, you know the whole goal is to control the board, and winning involves making sure your opponents lose all their money and property. That is, players are led down one path. Greed. It's a rule set that not only encourages greed and all the attributes that come with that, but makes it a necessary part of the experience. The point isn't about if the game is fun or not, but that the rules encourage this behavior for participation regardless of your own personal values. And if you refuse to abide by them, like by cheating, the other players will probably get angry at you or they'll kick you out and you won't be a part of the game anymore. So when we talk about social systems here, it's important to consider what you as a person privileged to be setting the rules do with this. So as Johnson notes, notice that we can describe the game without saying anything about the personalities, intentions, attitudes, or other characteristics of the people who might be playing it. The game, in other words, has an existence that we can describe all by itself. It exists whether or not anyone is playing it. The same is true of social systems. So what outcomes are you looking for with your rule set? What is the path of least resistance? In Monopoly, it's greed. And for Kitfox, it's kindness. So now that we understand what a social system is, we can kind of get into the nitty-gritty of how you create rules. So people will have different ideas of the rules and how they should be implemented, but at the very least, according to the World Justice Project and my own studies in sociology, these are the universal principles for the rule of law. So first is that they're clearly defined. So don't mince your words. Don't try to make it some complicated thing. Make it very easy to understand. Two, they're publicized. So they're very easy to find and see, not hidden anywhere. Three, they're stable, so they don't change very frequently. You don't take anyone by surprise by a sudden change in rules. Four, they're just, so they seem reasonably fair for what they are and what the space is. And 5, which is very important, which I have not seen too many people adhere to sometimes, is that they are applied evenly and quickly to everyone in the space, no matter how much of a participant they are in it, etc. So keep those in mind when you create rules. So for example, these are the KitFox Discord rules. Don't worry about reading them all. They're all in our Discord. But I just wanted to point out that as part of the rules, I actually have a general framing element for the tone I expect from those joining. And this is kind of part of setting the tone for the entire space. So often what I'll do when I know we have a big announcement coming up, meaning our Discord will be flooded with new people, is warn the community that the censor bot will be hypersensitive to more words. This helps drive the tone of what I expect from new people entering. And once the initial boom is over, I go back to relaxing the rules. And when rules are broken, often what helps is a message their way with an explanation or a warning before any action is taken, rather than an outright call out for everyone to see. Shame and embarrassment in public is usually more effective for making the person feel defensive rather than receptive to change. Give people a chance to improve and learn. And if someone's coming out of anger, talk to them. See if you can help them vent in a healthy, productive way and lead them to understand the tone of the community. If they still don't understand, maybe the community isn't for them. Membership is a conditional privilege that you can remove at any time, and you get to set the tone. And if it's a troll or someone, just there to cause chaos, it's okay to ban them. There's a time and place for everything, and you can't work with anyone coming in with bad intentions. So be decisive. And of course, there does actually need to be someone enforcing the rules for this to work. You can't just have it sit there and do nothing. Don't fear rule enforcement. It helps drive productive conversation and weeds out those that are under false pretenses. Basically, just nip toxic members in the bud. Don't keep toxic members around because they talk and contribute to a space and you're afraid of silence. They actually take up more space and drive away more genuinely interested members. And every forum needs rules to maintain its purpose and functionality. There are going to be times when you can't monitor social. You're at a convention, vacation, busy, etc. A good community shouldn't collapse because you're not around. The better your rules, the better your community can sustain itself. So the next step in community design is creating a baseline of respect of you as a person in the community. They need to understand that you are obviously a living, breathing person with emotions and boundaries. If your community can't respect your boundaries, they probably won't respect each other's. So this is the first step that moves people from only seeing like nameless, faceless rules into seeing you as a person. And that's very important. So let's talk about examples on steps on how to create this. First, it's my favorite, is to be offline. Be offline when you need to be. 9 to 5 p.m., whatever your work hours are. When I pop in secretly to places like our Discord to check nothing is on fire, even if someone needs me, I try not to respond until the morning. This way, they respect my time, the Discord gets used to it, etc. I encourage others to be accountable to each other and me. Being critical of your actions is okay. You're allowed to make mistakes. People are allowed to disagree. You're human. But there are certain ways to garner criticism that are more respectful than others. And telling them you are receptive to it, but if it's framed constructively, is a really good starting point. Those that hurl abuses are going to be blocked probably or ignored rather than listened to. And people will quickly understand that. Plus, how you act among those that disagree or argue with you matters. Just because someone might say or do something stupid doesn't mean that it's okay to mock members of the community or those that leave it. Your community is keeping an eye on what you say. If you start talking behind someone's backs, if they leave your community, even if you think it'd be really funny, it doesn't actually reflect very well on you. For respect, you need to separate people from their behaviors. Address what they're doing and not who they actually are. And if you do get through to them, you can give people a golden bridge. This basically means not holding something against someone. Allow people who might have voiced something undesirable to be able to exit or change their mind gracefully with no shame. So for example, maybe you've managed to calm someone down after they come into your Discord angry that a game is delayed. A golden bridge allows them to stay in your community should they so choose, or to leave without a sense of bitterness against the studio. Instead of saying something like, I told you so, or making a really snarky comment towards them to humiliate them further, you can say something like, we all make mistakes, or something as simple as no worries, or it's all good, works too. Basically, just don't be petty. Be someone that they can look up to. But respect isn't just about addressing negative emotions. Some of the most difficult things in community development are not the angry trolls. It's the members who you know have your best interests at heart, but cross some sort of personal boundary or seek a therapy-like relationship with you. that you're really not equipped to handle. These are hard to call out. And my tips for you here are really difficult because you can't give vague generalized advice for this. I will say that above all, it's important to let them know that you do care about their well-being. And because of that, professional help is a better resource than you are. And honestly, it probably definitely is better than you, unless you're a trained therapist, in which case, great job. So soon they will see that you're doing your best when you have time with them and not that you're neglecting or ignoring their needs. Just like how a community may expect you to act a certain way, you must also set expectations for them. So once respect is established, we move on to norms, which is a further dive into the acceptable ways of communication within the community as a whole. So there are two kinds of norms. Mores, which are norms that carry great importance like laws, chat rules, etc. Don't murder, whatever. And folkways, which are norms about casual daily interaction. Mores we understand really well. Rules should not be broken. Folkways distinguish what we think is rude or polite, and often in community development that's overlooked, but can plant the seed of unkindness when broken. That's why, as a community dev, you have to mentally distinguish what you think is acceptable ways for your community to talk to you and each other. Rules are easily defined, politeness is not. For example, a folkway we have in North America is that you shouldn't stare at people when you're in an elevator. It's not illegal to stare at them, it's just pretty rude and kind of weird. And for online communities, a joke in one game community might not fly in another. So while you can't necessarily make rules on politeness, you can influence it. Also be aware how your tone may come across to a stranger or someone who has just joined your community. For example, even proper capitalization and punctuation can actually make you sound quite strict in a very casual chatting environment. You'll become the de facto leader for setting the folkways, even if you don't feel like you are. So keep in mind how you interact and the jokes you make, because this will automatically be seen as the acceptable ways to communicate with each other. The more your community understands the norms of discourse, the better they interact with each other. So a lot of people think it's things like anonymity that creates trolls, or what I will very scientifically call jerks. But it's not just that. After all, anonymous acts of kindness also exist. I argue it's when you have a person plus anonymity plus an audience that tolerates that behavior that kind of creates this jerk. So what norms does is when you have people come in with anonymity, known social norms, and a community that isn't receptive to their unkindness, then you'll get a normal person or regular person, or at least someone who understands that this community isn't for them, or the way they are interacting with us isn't seen as acceptable. All right, so then we move on to one of the hardest things to create, which is trust. I don't think I'm a perfect community developer, far from it, but what matters is that your community trusts that you're doing your best with the resources that you have. So you have to understand that if you're in a public-facing position, the community is literally relying on you. They have no other way of getting a sense of the studio, usually, unless it's through you. And it's a really difficult line to straddle, being understanding of both the developer side and the community side, which is why you need to be able to have your players trust you and what you do. So in order to create trust, there are 4 core tenets you need to do your best to adhere to, and that's integrity, action, intimacy, and openness. Integrity can be any number of things like admitting mistakes, sometimes acting against your own interests or financial gain, for example, saying a game isn't right for someone or offering a refund, keeping promises, and especially being honest when you don't want to be. For example, people are being hyped about something that isn't actually coming to the game. Second is action, and this is the process of doing something that lasts through some time and importantly consists of more than one act. Like I've said before, kindness is a verb, not a noun. It's something that has to continue happening. Trust isn't just lip service. You need to do things for them, or at least try, being reliable, trusting them with information, interacting with them, etc. There's also openness. You're going to need to give a bit in order to receive, showing compassion and sharing your thoughts and not in this difficult way being a closed off person, even though you may have those days, which is fine too. And when asking for feedback, be open and understanding instead of defensive. And then there's intimacy. So the less of a stranger you are, the more you interact with people, the more exposed they are to you. Creating shared experiences and finding common ground, which should be easier since they're there for your game, and builds a rapport. And the more rapport you build, the more trust. Of course, this is partly dependent on your own studio acting responsibly. Some things are out of your control, but these are things for you to keep in mind. And also, this will take time. You cannot rush this. This is a continuous circle of events that need to happen constantly. The more consistent, the better. So for example, I've asked for feedback from our community, and this isn't some surface level way to placate them. I don't ask for feedback unless I genuinely think I can do something with that. So they do appreciate and they do notice when they see you doing something. They don't always voice it, but there have been times where it has been voiced and that has been very nice. There are so many ways you can show you're sincere, but again, keep in mind this isn't some sort of mind trick. You have to be sincere and the trust will build slowly over time. And you can also have fun with them. That is an important part of trust. Be more than just information givers, warning issuers, or lofty out of reach people. Every positive interaction you have with your community builds this rapport. And I'm not going to lie, it's going to take a lot of time, again, but it is definitely worth it. All right, so the last one, which is home. And say it with me, soft skills are valuable. They're so valuable, especially online when you're missing most of the nonverbal cues that give context to how a person is feeling. Your soft skills are imperative to creating a warm, relaxing space. Home, if you will. So one-way communication is a little bit more difficult to do this with, but in places where you can interact more with people like forums and Discord, there is more flexibility and opportunities to create this feeling. But there's greater difficulty in keeping it consistent since it depends on the members interacting within it. Just like mass conventions or crowds, it can be a really overwhelming place. So I think a lot of people equate the ability to communicate as being equal to actual connections with others, which is false. Connection is when people feel heard, seen, and valued and can derive strength from the relationship. So we need to design for these moments. So cozier, more selective rooms allow for further similarity and goal orientation between members, encourages repeated interactions, and manages the density of the community from feeling too overwhelming and creates that true connection. So KitFox Discord, for example, has pronoun roles, cozy channels like Cute and Good and Food and Noms, private little servers and little secrets that you can discover as ways of joy. And these channels don't have any immediate value related to KitFox. However, they do bring a sense of humanity to the space and a place of refuge when channels are more chatty. And you may find other ways to foster a kinder space in your places. This is by no means the only way to create home-like feelings. Maybe you'll have a fun theme to your Discord. Maybe you'll have a meta game that people can participate in. Maybe you'll literally make it all about being wholesome. Whatever you want. As you solidify your community pillars and uphold your community to standards you set, the better their reputation becomes. We've had people join KitFox purely because people had heard it was a positive place to be in. And most newcomers see how people interact, see the reputation, and naturally go along with this. It's a very beneficial and pleasant circle of events. So designing kinder communities and moderation is not just about risk management. Its lifetime value will reward you. People will want to interact and will stick around for your future games to come. And long-term, there's less work on your end. Of course, at its very core, regardless of the spaces we create, KitFox and any other studio exist to sell products, games, t-shirts, limited box sets, whatever. But while we're at it, we might as well do our best to make the places we touch a little bit more positive. The user experience in games is important, but combined with a warm, friendly user experience in the community, that's good design. Kindness to me is like a candle. So some kindness will create a small glow in people and it'll be really nice. Some kindness doesn't light anyone's candle at all. That's okay too. But maybe it'll set someone's candle on fire and create a huge ray of light within them. There are different intensities and who knows where it'll spread. Maybe it'll light other candles and create warm glows of kindness in other people who really need it. And I know this has an impact. I know this affects people. I know this because there have been times where I've been saved by a small gesture or a little message from someone online. This talk was based partially on my own experiences as a confused and anxious person many a time, but it's also rooted in the now, where I'm very blessed to have a job that allows me to interact with a community that I love very, very much. They've shown me time and time again that kindness is capable even when we are all a little unsure, worried, or down, especially in 2020. And that it's okay to turn to a stranger and talk about something silly and nonsensical and be accepted for that. Every time we choose kindness, we make the world around us just a little bit kinder and braver. We don't need to just survive as an industry. We want to thrive. It's not impossible to combine technology and creativity with compassion and ethics. For me, meaning flows from connection. from being a part of communities that are bigger than me, but nevertheless value and include me in them. So if we can create kinder spaces online, people can form real connections they couldn't have otherwise. And I hope that connection helps them face the real world too. And if you thought this whole talk, especially the end, was dumb and cheesy, then I hope some kindness hits you so hard that your jaw breaks from smiling too much. Thanks for listening to my talk.